And we are live. Yes, the first Integrity Google Hangout on content strategy. We're very excited to share some insights with you. We are having some technical nuances in learning how to use this platform new and use it well. But we might just wait a couple of seconds before we get kick-started. So let's get started. I have tried to share our content strategy presentation with you, but our lack of new or expertise on Hangouts means that it's not coming up. It's coming up as a black screen. So I'm sorry for most of you out there. You'll have to put up with my face for the duration of this exercise, but I'll send you the slides thereafter. So today we're going to talk about content and content strategy. My name is Richenda Vermeulen and I am the Director of Integrity Agency. We are a Melbourne-based digital agency that helps brands grow online. So we work with some very large organisations and we work with small organisations, and often the principles are similar in growing. It's just the amount of growth or the rapid growth depends on the amount of budget and resources that you obviously have. There is a hashtag for today. It's #IntegrityWebinar. Our Twitter account is @IntegrityAgency, and we will also be live tweeting this Hangout. But most of today, we're going to talk about content marketing and your content strategy. And obviously, I will also field questions from you. You are able to ask questions through, there's a Q&A app here on the left side of the screen. You'll see Q&A listed there. And that's where you can ask me questions directly pertaining to your content strategy or content strategies for your clients that you want to brainstorm if you are from another agency. But let's kick off right into this topic. So what is content marketing? It's quite a buzzword now. You hear a lot of different people talking about it in different ways. It's definitely the hot thing to talk about right now, in digital marketing, that is, not in the world. But one of the things that it always gets pulled in with is social media marketing, as if content marketing has come out of the new realm of social media. That's not accurate. Social media marketing has existed, for a short amount of time, between 8 to 10 years, depending on who you ask. Whereas content marketing has actually been something that has existed for decades, potentially even centuries, depending on your definition. I did have a lovely slide, which I'll share with you through email later on, that has the brief history of content marketing. The Content Marketing Institute has come out with it. And within their history, they look at caveman drawings as being the first sign or the first tool that content marketers were using. So the example there would be caveman drawings of spears, and if a person is trying to sell a spear, they might see how a spear is used. Not that it was necessarily used that way, but the essence of content marketing really comes back to storytelling. You can see early marketing examples, like in the year 1900, you had the Michelin Man. They were driving car sales or car tire sales by the Michelin Man through a thick guidebook about the use of tires. And you see that throughout history, you know, recipe books that are created for products like Jello, or like Betty Crocker, who, you know, had her own cake line in the US, that really looking at what are pieces of information, whether they be written information, pictures, tips, graphics, that help people, that whether they provide something engaging or interesting, or actually help them use the product that they're looking to sell. So how content marketing has become a buzzword is because, you know, social marketing has risen, and obviously all social channels need content on those channels. And because of the amount of content that's required through building these large social channels, so a Facebook audience of 1 million or 2 million, 3 million, that need a lot of content, or the amount of video content that's coming off YouTube, all of this has put an increased need on this area, whereas, you know, 50 years ago, it was a very niche form of marketing, this informative content style marketing. But why is it important? I think it's important to talk about it. We can talk about its origins for a lifetime. We might even be able to debate some of those origins. But why content marketing is important is really something else. There are many studies that are coming out and talking about long-form content being of great use. But really, at its core, it's about engaging your customers. Most products or services, whether they be B2B or B2C, selling to one customer, selling to a network, or selling from business to business, are looking, there's this core need to create engagement with those customers or engagement with those businesses. The old world of marketing and advertising would look at just sending really simple advertising message, you know, that whole buy now, buy now. If you look at the old digital marketing funnel, where these messages are being I guess, shouted at, whereas content marketing, this new age, and this importance of content marketing is around creating more meaningful engagements, around giving your audiences more. Seth Godin talks a lot about this. If you follow Seth Godin in the US, he's one of the leading thinkers in marketing around the world, and he talks about, you know, you give away things for free, give away, and we're not talking about, you know, prizes and competitions, but giving away valuable information, giving away valuable insights, helping people to understand your product or your service better. But in essence, that information might not be specific to your product or service. It could be specific to the category that you're in or the industry that you're in. But engagement is really core to content marketing and why it's important. There are still so many messages that consumers are being bombarded with on a day-to-day basis. You might as well notice that, yourself, that you are sent thousands of messages per day, that you're sifting through what the importance of that is. Good content marketing is getting valuable messages or taking those messages and putting them into a context which is valuable to your customers, in which positions you in a way, or your company in a light that is going to be remembered and meaningful by that customer. So it's really a way of cutting through the clutter of all of the messages that are going out by marketers right now. It's behind this new ideology in marketing of you give customers something for free before you ask them to buy from you, which is very different to the traditional buy now, buy now, buy now advertising approach. But what I find it really surprising when we look at content marketing and strategy is that there are very few brands or marketers that actually have a content marketing strategy in place. In fact, 63% of Australian marketers say they don't have a documented content strategy in place. And then only 33%, you could say this is linked, but only 33% would say that they believe that their content is effective. So they might have increased resources to their content or content marketing efforts, but those resources may or may not actually be working for you. So that's really a lot of uncertainty. And what I hope to give today in this Hangout is more certainty about what you can be doing, and also answer any questions that you may have about what you are doing. The old term, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, really applies to content marketing. That is because doing this well often, creates, it takes a lot of time to do that. It isn't something that you can just flick a switch on. It's not like just placing a bunch of advertising on. It takes time. It takes understanding your customers. The content itself could be longer form or could be quite visual in nature. So you really need to have a strategy in place, or at least a plan in place, to make sure that you're using those resources adequately. Often a lot of organizations that we work with, they might have amazing content. They might have really rich content, really interesting content, but they could not have a strategy in place at all, or have a bad strategy, and that's actually a waste of that asset. It's a waste of that content. So one doesn't come without the other. It's not just about creating the best content available, but it's also looking at, well, who's going to receive that content, and why are they receiving that content, and what is going to be most meaningful, and how do we measure whether the content we're putting out is meaningful. So let's talk a little bit about how to make that happen, because it can be tough, but I'm here to help. We have a small and easy formula that we use at Integrity, and this applies differently depending on the brand that we're working with. But we call it the goal plane solution measure one-liner. You can find it on our blog. I'll tweet that out now through the seminar, or Kevin from our team. Just say hi to Kevin, who's sitting beside me here.
Hi, guys.
He's part of the Integrity support team. This goal plane measure solution strategy is very simple to follow. It firstly looks at identifying what you want to do through your content, then identifying your customer's pain point, the solution to that pain point, and the measurement of that solution and your effectiveness. So the first obviously being the goal, looking at the goal that you want to create, or the goal that you have in mind for your audience. So if you're a not-for-profit organization, the goal may be around generating donations. If you're a business-to-business customer, it might be about generating leads or creating relationships with new customers. If you're a large organization that maybe had the traction previously and have lost some of your market share, it might be around brand awareness. If you're an organization that has had maybe some controversial issues pop up in the last year, and you're worried about the impact on your brand, it might be around dispelling myths. There are many different ways that you can craft a content strategy, and it's really about setting the appropriate goal and what you want to achieve. It might be 10 of those things. That's not helpful. You want to address one thing at a time. So I'd suggest picking one element, whether it's getting more customers, getting more donations, increasing awareness, dispelling myths. It might be thought leadership. This is an area that I look at my business, Integrity, that I started 2 years ago. And this is really an important area for us. So a lot of what we talk about is actually, it's premature for the market that we're in. I started doing digital marketing in the US, and when I came back to Australia, I noticed that the landscape was really different here. When you run a services business that's based on digital marketing, if your market isn't necessarily ready for the type of services that you're providing, it's your role, or our role, to make sure that we're speaking to that market and preparing them for that, so that they then understand our services. That's a crux behind content strategy for us, is how do we increase profile and also understanding of the services that we are delivering to a market that may not be ready for it yet. But for yourself, it's about defining that one goal or maybe two goals and testing over a time period. The next piece is the most interesting, and it's not usually how I guess marketers would look at developing a marketing strategy, you usually would look at who your target audience and how do you speak to that target audience. And then you'd have some measurements thereafter and that are tracking to those goals. But for us, we're looking at, well, what are your goals first? And the second step is the customers that you want to reach, what are their pain points? So rather than looking first at, well, how are you going to market your message to those people so that they understand what you are selling or what your organization does, or how you're giving the information that you want to hear. Instead, it flips that and has you look at your customers first, or you look at the people that support your organization first and say, what is going on in their lives? What is it that is potentially taking up their time, is potentially information that they don't know about? So if we go back to the 1900s Michelin Man example, that book could have been all about changing a tire. Did people at that time not really know much about tires or about changing that tires? They could have created that piece of content based on doing some market research to understand a pain point that the customer was having. For us, I've talked about part of our content strategy around thought leadership and sharing information. We know that marketing managers are confused with metrics and confused with different forms of digital marketing tactics, and they're also short on time. So part of our strategy is, how do we give bite-sized pieces of information, or whether they be white papers or even seminars like this, to share some of that information. So think about your customer, or think about your supporters, think about what's going on in their lives, or look at your research and data. Some of those things, are things you'll have to test and learn. Maybe they're instincts that you've noticed from looking at the way they interact. But start identifying what some of those pain points are, and what the pain points are in relation to your brand. So, if it's a marketing manager, for instance, if we're going to use integrity as an example, a marketing manager who's short on time, does not know about digital marketing, does not also know about integrity. There's no reason for them to trust us or to trust what we're saying. So there's, again, a pain point there. So they have these pain points in their workplace, and then there's our pain point in relating to them. And then the content looks at, well, how do we bridge that gap between those two? That would be the same with your organization. So if you look at what is the pain point that your customer or supporter might be feeling. So take the Michelin Man, for example. I can't change a tire, or I hate using that example, that sounds so sexist, but I don't know much about tires. Which tire should I buy? And then on the other side of that is, well, why would I buy from Michelin? And that's a piece of content that bridges that gap, that explains what the tires are and where you can buy them, and all this information happens to be hosted by Michelin. Think about that for your organization. Going to the next part, so we've identified you have to have a goal, you have to find a pain point, and then the solution. That's where the content marketing piece comes in. What type of content addresses that pain point? For some of our clients, that may be educational. It might be similar to what we talked about with the Michelin Man, educational about tires and giving them more information to buy your product adequately. For others, it might be more appealing. So, we know that for a certain customer, they might be considering 4 different organizations to buy a product or service from when they're making that choice. So this is what we find in research. McKinsey's actually come out with a lot of research about this. It's that 90% of customer decisions are made in the evaluation stage, they call it. So that's when, after someone's been made aware of the brand, they're doing their own research online. You probably noticed that for yourself. So as they're doing that research online, they might be comparing 3 or 4 different types of organizations and which do they buy from or donate to. The pain point and the solution point might be, so the pain point is they're looking at multiple different options. They don't know which one to pick. The solution is, well, we give them an example of why to pick us. We give them information on what they're going to get in coming with us. And that might be, the solution might look very different depending on the amount of resources or the type of question it is. Say it's to do with purchasing a car. There might be 3 or 4 different websites that they go to where we know that they're looking at safety information. So having kind of a safety checklist is probably the bare minimum that websites can provide as far as seatbelt measurements, being certified. But what's that next level of content they could be providing? Could it be research behind what truly makes driving a car safe? That could be scientific studies that are shared in an interesting way. Could it be a video around road safety and how to best educate your children on what road safety looks like? Could it be facts and statistics about where most accidents happen? Do you see where I'm going here? I'm pointing out, we might have one piece of one solution or idea that we want to talk about and focus on road safety, but the road to get to sharing that information could look very different. And at all these touch points, you can have different mechanisms to garner the attention of that person. So that could be capturing their email address. That could be linking that piece of information to your Facebook page. It could be further getting them to log in with information, make an account on road safety on your website. There's so many different layers that you can go into that type of content. And it's really a matter of just looking at, well, what meets your goal closely. So if your goal is to obtain email addresses that could potentially be leads for that car manufacturer or car provider, it might be around giving that scientific research or giving that checklist to giving that through an email mechanism where you have to give your email address. If it's around increasing awareness and engagement with your brand, it might be a really provocative piece of content that someone may likely be willing to share on their social profile. So it really, again, it's linking back to that goal, the goal that you set at the start, to the pain point, and then to the solution. So the goal, lead generation; the pain point, customer wants to know about safety; the solution, giving safety information or giving safety-based content that links to the goal of getting that lead. And lastly, it should be the most easy part of the content strategy, but it's often the most challenging because there's so much you can look at here, but it's around measurement. So how do you make sure that you have a measure that aligns to the outcome that you want to achieve? For lead generation, it's simple. That could be as simple as capturing an email address. For awareness, it can be a little bit harder. So that could be around growth of your audience. So the amount of impressions, the amount of web visits, the amount that your audience on Facebook grows, so likes, engagement levels. Engagement you can often measure by looking at the amount of people talking about us on Facebook divided by the size of the audience. Also sales, and that really depends on how sophisticated your tracking mechanisms are and also the type of business that you run. There's large businesses or large organizations that may have a very expensive pain point like buying, or very expensive, price point like buying a car or buying a house. It might be a little bit trickier to track your piece of content towards that end point of sale. But if your product is online, you could look at the type of traffic. There's something called assisted conversion on Google Analytics. So you can look at the web visitor and what they visited before they purchased your product. Again, it really depends on the type of product you have and the level of sophistication of your tracking systems. If there's one area to really strongly get support on externally, I would say measurement is a good area to do that. One of the most common pain points we see with our clients is when we start working with them, their analytics is often not set up accurately. For the most part, most of them, it's not set up accurately at all. And one of the first tasks we take is really cleaning that up and making sure that they're given insight into how they're performing. But there are other ways to look at measurement as well. It's not just in looking at web data. It could also be in consumer research. So a lot of brands we work with, they might do a consumer study once a year where they ask in-depth questions about what made them purchase finally, or what were some of the influences in their decision to support a certain cause or to buy a certain product. And it's very interesting when you look at those in-depth insights versus just looking at web data, because when you look at those in-depth insights, you start to see the myriad of questions and complexities, I guess, around what drives a decision. It's usually not just one piece of content, or it's usually not one channel. That rarely do people say, I saw a billboard and that made me want to do that, or I saw a TV ad. It's usually I saw a TV ad and then I did my research and I found this piece of information and then I looked here and then I compared it, and it's this very multi-touch point type of marketing behavior, which is really where we should be looking at targeting our marketing efforts in the future. So that's kind of how we put it all together. We've got the goal, got the pain point, the solution, and the measurement. I hope that's made sense to you. I know that it's a little bit tricky to think about in such simple terms, because you might have multiple goals in your organization and your customers might have multiple pain points. But in order to create the most accurate information using accurate content, using the resources that you have available, because you could probably, no matter how small your business is, I bet you could have 50 staff working on your content, or you could have 1 staff or a half staff member working on your content. It's one of those how long's a piece of string type situations where really it's about looking at the resources you have and what's possible. And the more you can focus on a specific goal, a specific pain point, and start testing solutions within the resources that you have, the more likely you're going to be successful. So that's my basic overview of content marketing. It's a bit of a 101. I know that it's hard to apply to a lot of to all organizations. It does take some fleshing out one-to-one, but that's what I'm here for. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A functionality that you'll find on Google Hangouts, or you can send it to us via Twitter. Do we have any that have come via Twitter yet, Kevin? Not at this point. Okay, great. Well, I am going to hang out here for maybe say 10 more minutes and ask some questions. But to be here to answer some questions if you have them. But otherwise, you could just be looking at my mug most of the time. Here we go. Question 1. How would you go about selecting the pain point to hone in on if there are heaps of options? Great. Great question by Hannah. Pain points to hone in on. That's a really good one. I guess the first place to look is which is the one that your organization is talking about the most. So, you might have, and for the most part, that's how do we get more customers, or how do I get people to donate or give more. So by finding that piece first, what's the biggest or loudest problem, that's the one I would suggest honing in on. And usually from that you can find a number of solutions that might speak to that pain point and to speak to some of the others. Hopefully that answers your question, Hannah. I really like this Q&A functionality. For those who aren't aware, we're based out of the York Butter Factory. You can see these bricks behind me. It's one of the oldest buildings, at least on King Street, and it's a really great space to work out of. There are over, I think it's 60 tech startups in this space, so we're really grateful to be part of It's a robust tech community here. Okay, so without any more questions, I think we can close this Hangout early. I want to thank you for tuning in. We will send out, if you like, we can send out slides from today. If you email me at Richenda, oh, here we go, one more question. Hello, Brody Wales. Can you recommend any organizations you see doing content very well? Yeah, there are a number of organizations that are doing content well. I think often we see this being done a lot more strongly in not-for-profits than we do see it in commercial brands, mostly because for commercial brands, they're very tied to a more traditional way of working. So they're very tied to large advertising campaigns or paid marketing spend. And where we really see kind of that evaluation style content or content marketing working well in the not-for-profit space is if you look at some international not-for-profits, you know, often the products that they sell, the products or the service that they sell is a monthly commitment to support their cause. And they know that there are a lot of questions or uncertainty or a lot of misinformation about their organization. So the leading ones will have quite detailed information about their financial reporting, will directly address some of the myths that come up about their programs, potentially, about how they spend their funding. They also create really beautiful types of content. So if you look at Charity Water, their content is for their brand, but at the end of the day, their content operates as marketing, as word-of-mouth marketing. It speaks to the stories behind their work very strongly. It also speaks individually to how donors really relate to the brand. So not only, you know, they don't as much have the need to proactively dispel some of the myths that you find in other larger not-for-profits. What they really do well is explaining their product in the content they use to market themselves. So in essence, every campaign that they send out is sold via a beautiful video that they release. And in this video, it tells a story of their next big goal or the next big target that they have. Their whole campaigns are content driven, and they have a zero paid media spend on that content as well. So that really tells you a lot. And this is the fastest growing charity in the world. On the consumer goods side or on the corporate side, you don't see big services businesses doing that well. You know, we should be seeing more of that as time goes along. When you look at energy companies and looking at energy consumption and that sort of thing, there would be easy ways like preserve energy through doing these 5 things, or there could be so many insights or information sources where you're generating leads for these energy companies through sharing information like that, but you don't see that happening. Where you do often see it happening is in the services businesses. So giving out free bits of advice. You know, services businesses exist to consult and to give information on a contractual basis with clients. So that means it's very easy for them to give free bits of advice. So things like white papers or other bits of information are really easy to share, and that's how you can generate email addresses or capture email addresses and grow your email list, which, you know, that might turn into a lead a year on, it might turn into a lead 3 years down the track. You never know the leads that you generate today based on the content that you create, the value that they'll have in the future. Again, it's about creating that long-term view for what a customer relationship could look like rather than what are they buying tomorrow. There's another question from Hannah. What are the dangers to avoid in content marketing, i.e. any easy pitfalls or mistakes to make? That's a really good question. I think the biggest one I see is a lot of time and resources being spent on one piece of content and not really having a plan for what to do with that. So the most common time you see this is when you have a brand that's looking to spend $50,000 or more on a video, and they're like, let's tell our story this way because this is so exciting, and they put lots of production value into it, and they will sometimes say things like, let's make this go viral, but no real strategy around, well, who is this going to go out to? How are we going to reach them? What are the different channels we can use? So what are the paid media channels? So for video content, there are so many ways that for small amounts of money, you can promote video content now. So I think that's one mistake we see. A lot of resources into something with a lot of high expectations, with not much of a distribution plan for that content. The other is not creating content that really speaks to a pain point. So, you know, I'm giving an example of a client. We are an energy client, and we have lots of really interesting information internally about water or about water consumption, but we're going to share that in a way that looks like a fact sheet that you would get from the government, rather than something interesting that people would want to consume. So they might have all the right intentions about that content, because water consumption can be quite interesting, but the way they package it or the way it comes across as really dry and boring and not very engaging. So I guess that's the other thing, having the right intentions but not actually crafting something that's interesting. At the end of the day, you always have to look at why would someone want to read this? Why would they find this interesting? Would you find this interesting if you didn't work at the organization? Would you share it with your friends? If those answers are mostly no, then you should probably look at why you're creating it in the first place. So they're probably the main two: creating a really strong piece of content potentially, but with no distribution plan. And the other is having that insulated view rather than looking at what your customers would really find interesting. So we have another 15 minutes available. I'll wait to see if there's any more questions, but these have been really great so far. Thank you, guys. And I'll also make sure that we tweet out the link to that content marketing blog post that we wrote earlier. I will just pop into the chat here my email address if you would like to receive the slides that I wasn't able to share today. And it looks like we don't have any more questions. So thank you very much for participating in today's Google Hangout. I think this is going to be made available on YouTube over the next day or two. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. And for those who would like the slides, feel free to send me an email at that address. Have a lovely day.